I was like, oh man, the whole house is, like the front of this house is gone.
By the time I got to the door, it was black and I could see debris just flying everywhere.
So that's Texas weather for you.
All I had to do was just watch my whole life float down the street.
Here in Houston, we are no stranger to severe weather.
And when it comes to disasters like a hurricane or winter freeze, we often have days to prepare.
But those are not the only severe weather events that hit this city.
Everything from derechos to flooding can do serious damage.
And often in those situations, you don't have days to prepare, you only have minutes.
Look, record. I see it. Holy cow, there's a tornado.
Tornadoes, the most unpredictable weather phenomena in the world, and something that we are not a stranger to here in Southeast Texas. But even with all of the advancements in weather technology over the last 50 years, we are still not at a point where we can predict the exact storm that will drop a tornado and when it will happen. But we have gotten to the point where we can identify weather patterns that lead to tornado outbreaks and the time of year when they are most likely to occur. Now, in Tornado Alley, going from Oklahoma to Kansas and Nebraska, their tornado season typically peaks during the months of April and May, sometimes getting into the month of June as well. But for us here in Southeast Texas, it's a little more complicated than that. Behind me is a graphic showing the tornado frequency just in Harris County from the years 1992 to 2019. And you can see we share that big spike with Tornado Alley for tornado frequency during the months of April and May. But something else jumps out at you on this screen, and that is the secondary peak, which happens in the fall, getting into the winter months. We see a tornado peak going from October all the way through January. Now, even though November is the month, historically speaking, where Harris County has seen the most tornadoes in the last 20 years, our strongest tornadoes in the last 3 years alone across Southeast Texas have happened in the months of December and January. Flashback to January of 2023, the Deer Park and Pasadena EF3 tornado, a violent tornado that created a significant amount of damage. More recently, the Porter Heights tornado in December of 2024 and the Chambers County tornado that ended up tracking all the way into southwestern Louisiana, both of those also EF3 tornadoes. So we are not a stranger to seeing strong tornadoes here in Southeast Texas, even though it is an unusual phenomena. So while we can't pinpoint the exact storms that will drop these violent forms of nature, we can identify the weather conditions that lead to these outbreaks. And it all starts with the Gulf, our big source for warm and humid air, which is something that we're not a stranger to even in the months of December and January. Think about how many Christmases you've spent in shorts and t-shirts. Well, in the months of December and January, you've got a lot of cold air that builds up across the United States. And occasionally, if the jet stream can dip far enough south, those two air masses clash. And when that happens, an area of low pressure develops on the lee side or the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. And if that area of low pressure, the center of energy, can dip far enough south and move across the state of Texas, you will tap into the wind energy from the jet stream and the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico to develop a perfect setup for severe weather. That's exactly what happened in January of 2023 when the Deer Park Pasadena EF3 tornado went through Southeast Texas. We go to Jason Miles with footages from the aftermath of that storm.
Both near and far. Sounds of recovery fill the air.
The sound of everything, the glass shattering, is terrifying.
But it's the tornado itself Crystal Thompson cannot forget.
Within 5 minutes of figuring out that it was headed towards us, it hit us.
She says she clutched her baby in an interior hallway alongside her husband and his mother.
My mother-in-law and my husband are covering me and the baby, and I'm just holding him. He's screaming.
This is their Pasadena rental home of 6 years before the tornado, and this is what it looked like immediately after it struck.
We very easily could have lost our lives that day.
Fortunately, 4 of 5 children were in school at the time.
My baby's crib is right on the other side right here.
But Thompson says one daughter is still dealing with trauma caused by what might have happened.
She's afraid to leave us. She said that she's worried that we're going to die when she's gone at school. And it's just really hard.
The Thompsons started a GoFundMe to try and cover what renter's insurance does not, along with the cost of hotel or Airbnb stays for the family of 8, until their recovery is complete.
Every day people can continue on with their lives while we're still struggling to get stability.
Well, as we've seen, tornadoes are possible in Southeast Texas any time of year, and sometimes they can come with very little warning, which means you need to make sure that you are able to jump into a safe place at the drop of a hat. So what does that mean? Well, if you're at home, many homes here in Southeast Texas don't have basements, which means the next alternative would be putting as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Typically, the center part of your home is your best bet. An interior hallway, even a bathroom. And if you have time, grab a bicycle helmet or maybe even a mattress. Taking the mattress off of your bed and bringing it with you to that safe spot, whether it's the bathroom or an interior hallway, adds an extra layer of protection for flying debris. Stay away from windows. Again, the most interior room of your home is going to be the safest. If you find yourself outside, it's important to lay flat and to avoid overpasses. Of course, if you can make it to shelter, and a sturdy shelter, that's your number one bet. But if you are out in an open field, make sure that you stay away from overpasses. This has proven deadly in the past. And the reason for this is because underneath an overpass, the winds from a tornado are magnified, meaning you could be ripped right from underneath that overpass and pulled into the tornado. And finally, with so many highways and in such a car-dependent area of the country, if you find yourself in a vehicle during a tornado warning and you can see that a tornado is moving in your direction, try to find shelter. If you can't get to shelter, your absolute last ditch scenario would be to find a ravine or a ditch on the side of the road, something that puts you below the rest of the ground level so that the winds from the tornado can travel over you and not suck you out. We recommend not staying in your car because if that car gets picked up by the tornado, even if you have your seatbelt on, that car could get tossed for several hundred yards or even miles, depending on the strength of the storm.
It's not just wind from a tornado that can cause damage here in Houston. This is what it looked like when a derecho hit in May of 2024. A derecho is a powerful windstorm that meets specific strength and distance requirements. It covers a distance of 240 miles and packs wind speeds of at least 58 miles an hour along most of its path. They produce isolated wind gusts of hurricane force and even spawn tornadoes. It all starts with a complex of thunderstorms that, under the right conditions, very warm, moist air at the surface and colder, drier air aloft, sustain themselves for a long stretch. When the squall line really strengthens, it bows, and we can see that signature on radar. It's called a bow echo. At this point, the thunderstorms push out exceptionally strong wind down to the surface through downbursts or microbursts, which causes the rain and wind to fan out horizontally. There are serial derechos, most often found in the plains, which are made of several bow echoes and move more slowly, and progressive derechos, found near the Great Lakes, that develop along a shorter line of storms and can move very quickly. Notice both of these typically develop well north of Houston. In fact, derecho climatology shows us Houston is in a zone that would be threatened by a derecho once every 4 years, and we just experienced it with our May 16th, 2024 derecho. It tore through our buildings downtown with wind gusts at 100 miles an hour, spat out 4 tornadoes that devastated Cypress and Waller County. The force killed 8 people and left behind $1.2 billion in destruction. Trayson Bragg shows us some of the destruction in the Heights.
Strong winds and heavy rains led to frightening scenes throughout Houston, including this would-be townhome crashing to the sidewalk in the Heights.
It was a loud noise that, just nothing else was going to make it.
Jeff Baker watched a construction site turn to a pile of lumber and nails through his front window. The moments also caught by his security camera.
So I went and played it in slow motion just to make sure nobody was impacted.
Thankfully, Baker tells me no one was hurt. On the other side of the heights, we found numerous massive downed trees, some of which knocked out power to the area, one even falling on top of a car, and another smashing through a home.
I was like, oh man, the whole house is, like the front of this house is gone.
But luckily, neighbors like Ricardo Guillermo were just doors away. He tells me instead of sitting at home in the dark, he decided to gas up the chainsaw and help those in need.
I have no clue who they are, don't know anything about them.
And as the chainsaws cut and the wood cracked, Guillermo met Daniel Lopez and 4 of his 5 sons dedicated to the exact same mission.
Look, make sure you get all these right here. In the next couple of days, we're gonna get all these guys coming out here charging an arm and a leg for this. If we can help, we'll go ahead and help our neighbors out, save some money.
Lopez says he met the homeowner just hours ago.
Did he say anything to you? Were they home when this happened? Do you know?
He was home when it happened, but he just came out earlier and just thanked us for clearing up some of the stuff.
Yes, miraculously, everyone made it out safely. As for these humble helpers, they had one message for all Houstonians.
Just get out and help your neighbors. It's about the best you can do.
When it comes to staying safe in a derecho, the advice is pretty similar to a tornado. Take shelter in a sturdy building and avoid open spaces. Some of the best prevention is to stay on top of local weather, especially when there are severe thunderstorms in the area. Of course, derechos are not the only destructive wind event we get here in Houston. Gina Kraft is here to talk more about straight line winds.
Yeah, the sudden arrival of hurricane force winds can be a shock. Check out this video from a couple years ago at A&M. Straight line winds hit the campus, suddenly sending students running for cover. But how does this happen? It all starts with rising air in the updraft of a storm. The air cools, causing it to condense, forming water droplets. Those water droplets will eventually become so heavy they fall to the earth in a pocket of colder air. When that air hits the ground, it compresses, causing the wind to increase in speed, pushing outward. Sometimes those winds can exceed 100 miles per hour. And while that is tornado strength wind, the difference is direction. The downdraft produces winds pushing outward from the storm in the same direction. Meanwhile, a tornado's winds are violently rotating in a circular direction.
Flash flooding is one of the greatest severe weather risks we face here in Houston. Here's the thing, we often see very heavy rain. And Houston's drainage system, it's designed like most other big cities to handle rainfall rates of about 2 inches per hour. Now, because we live right next to the Gulf, storms that form have a readily available source of deep tropical moisture just sitting here. And quite often it surges in. You can feel it on those really warm, humid days we get. And what will happen with this tropical flow is that the atmosphere will become saturated from top to bottom. Think of it, a 50,000-foot column of completely saturated air. It's like having a towel, 50,000 feet high, just soaked full of water. And when these storms develop, like even an afternoon thunderstorm, and it gets convective and taps into all that, it just is like wringing out that wet towel. And we can get rainfall rates that exceed 5 to 10 inches per hour. When this happens, it quickly overwhelms our primary drainage systems and leads to flash flooding. Our topography is flat. Houston is located on the coastal plain, which means it has little elevation change. Think of it as a large, flat beach. This means that when we get heavy rain, the water drains very slowly through our system of creeks and rivers and bayous, Halls Bayou, Greens Bayou, Sims Bayou, Buffalo Bayou, all trying to work heavy rainwater through the system and into Galveston Bay and eventually down to the Gulf of Mexico. But again, because our topography is so flat, it takes a long time to drain, and the water can literally just kind of pile up in places, and this causes our bayous to rise out of their banks, and that floods roads and structures. Then there's the concrete. Cities like Houston are built on concrete. Roads, parking lots, driveways just simply don't absorb the incoming rainfall like a field of grass and soil does. Concrete increases the amount of runoff into the bayous and increases the speed at which the water enters the bayou system. Both lead to an increase in flash flooding in Houston.
When the rain comes down that fast with nowhere for it to go, neighborhoods can flood in a matter of hours. That's exactly what happened 8 years ago when the Greenspoint area was left underwater and people were in desperate need of help.
As dawn broke Monday morning, daylight revealed much of Houston was a scene of disaster, and it seemed no neighborhood had suffered worse than Greenspoint.
There. All right, we got you. Come on.
Here we discovered a couple of guys in boats rescuing people stranded in the second stories of apartment complexes.
Come on. Okay, there you go. Get your purse. All right, here you go. Here.
So few people here to help, we knew we had to pitch in.
Where's my baby? You all right?
So what happened? I mean, did the water just come up? Were you trapped on the first floor or what?
No, we were actually on the second floor, but it's getting so hot that it's almost to the second floor.
And that's the way it was for hours. Nothing but volunteers in boats and on a nearby bridge.
Let me try to help these guys out here. Here we go. We got it. We got it. Okay, there you go. You all right? Whew, they get you out of there.
A long day, a long night.
Hey, we're on Channel 11 here. I want to ask you, what'd you see? What happened?
Oh man, the water just came up so fast.
But as the hours passed and we broadcast more live television pictures like this,
oh my God, look at the little baby.
Something started happening. A small armada of private boat owners literally came to the rescue.
You giving rides? So anybody who wants to ride with you can ride? All right. Okay, hang on.
School buses arrived to carry flood victims to shelters, and elected leaders were paying attention.
This city is not going to treat any neighborhood differently from another because of one's socioeconomic status.
By the next day, the water had receded, and people in Greenspoint began the hardest part of all, cleaning up and starting over.
What all did you lose?
Everything. Furniture, stuff, my husband works stuff. The trucks, we lost all 3 of the cars.
What are you going to do now?
Stay strong.
After all, we've been through this before, but it never gets easier.
That goes to show that steady and intense rain can turn Houston streets into rivers, and it's a reminder of how quickly things can change.
So what do you do to lower your risk? The thing you must do is buy flood insurance on your home or business. Even if you're above the 100-year floodplain, if you live in Houston, you are at risk for flooding every year. I strongly recommend that you research the elevation of your property before you purchase. Finding locations that are just a little bit higher can reduce your flood threat significantly. FEMA flood maps are a great resource and available at khou.com.
Storms just don't bring flooding. They can also pack a punch thanks to hail. This is hail in Garden Oaks from May of 2024. The viewer who shot it described it as the size of ping pong balls. The National Weather Service uses everyday objects to compare hail size. The smaller sizes are dime, penny, nickel, and quarter. A storm is considered severe when a hailstone is quarter size, that is 1 inch in diameter or larger. Large hail comes from strong storms, and strong storms produce strong updrafts or rapidly rising air. As air rises, it cools, and in the case of a thunderstorm, rising air can cool enough that it turns water droplets into ice, otherwise known as hail. In a severe thunderstorm, the updraft is so strong that it repeatedly lifts hail up into the storm, adding layers of ice. The growing hailstone falls to the surface when the storm can no longer support its weight. So the stronger the storm, the larger the hail, and the more damage done to your property. So how can you stay safe in a hailstorm? If you know it is coming, close your curtains to protect yourself from the possibility of flying glass. If you can, move your car into a garage or covered area. If you can't, cover the car with blankets. Avoid parking under trees. If you are driving, pull over safely. Stay inside your car and move to the middle of the car away from the windows.
One of the best ways for you and your family to stay safe is to stay weather aware.
That means keeping an eye on your local forecast on KHOU 11 News.
And making sure you have alerts turned on your phone.
Staying connected is essential anytime severe weather strikes.
And here in Houston, it's not a question of if severe weather will hit, but when.